So, as I indicated, this is a fairly long-standing tradition of about 30 years of these dinners, and there are a couple of facets of the dinner that I think mean a lot to all of us. One is hearing from the senior boys. It is important to have them speak so openly and caringly about their dads, and to have the younger boys in the room see that kind of affection and openness. It's great to have the music that we'll hear tonight from our jazz band and our chorus. And of course, it's great to have somebody like Peyton here tonight. More about him a little later. And I'd like to say thanks to a few people. Let me do that all at one time, and then we'll say thanks together. I'd like to say thanks to Grace Johnston and Jessica DeBrell from Martin's Barbecue, and Mike and Matt Bodner, who have been very helpful to us. They are part of the ownership of Martin's, and Pat Martin and their CEO, John Hare. And I'd like to say a special thanks to Pinnacle Bank and to the Matt Dobson family, who have supported this in honor of Mr. Matt Dobson, who was a member of our Board of Trust and passed away a couple of years ago. Please join me in thanking all of them. As I already indicated, we're going to jump right into this now with two seniors. They'll come up right after, one after the other. Please welcome Sam Dugan, and then Charles.
Good evening, everyone. I tried to keep it a secret from my dad that I was speaking tonight, but I made the fatal mistake of telling my mom, as in the middle of the day today, I got a text from my dad saying, "Now, I'm not sure if you're speaking tonight, but if you are, what time would it be?" So that was a fatal mistake on my part. But this is my sixth and final father-son dinner, and since the 7th grade, I wanted to speak about my dad. I wanted to use this platform to honor him, but also to make fun of him. Over my 18 years of life, he has certainly given me plenty of ammunition. Many of you may know my father, Bob Dugan, Cowboy Bob, or sometimes Seminole Bob, from football games, track meets, other events, or just being a friend of mine over my time here at NBA. If you know him, he is easily identified by his very odd sense of humor. He is often seen in what Blake Andrews calls the famous Bob Dugan workout attire, consisting of some cotton white t-shirt he's probably had since the early 1990s, Green Bay Packers shorts down past his knees, and some Hanes crew socks that he, for some reason, decides to roll down all the way down to his ankles. Sadly, I myself have not inherited this sense of style, but I always try my best. I'd like to start with a quick story to describe the kind of guy that my father is. A few years ago, my dad, my sister, and I were driving down Post Road towards Whitebridge Road when we saw some object in the middle of the road in the distance. I believe it was a Saturday afternoon, and the road was pretty busy at the time, so we didn't have a very good opportunity to see what it was. As we passed by, my dad immediately stops the car, puts it in park, and gets out. He stood in the middle of the road and motioned for oncoming traffic to stop. My sister and I were still sitting here, very confused. Moments later, we immediately realized that this object in the middle of the road was this massive turtle, just a huge turtle, and we now understood the situation. To give some background, my dad has always had this weird love for turtles, and we honestly have no idea why. But then my dad, with people in the cars around him, very confused and visibly very frustrated, motioned to stop traffic and picks up the turtle with his bare hands and walks it to a creek to safety. He then, motioned for traffic to keep going, got back in the car and acted like nothing happened, and we continued on with our day. So that basically is a quick way to describe my dad. My dad took an interesting path to reach the life that he now lives. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and lived there for around 6 years until he moved to Syracuse, New York, where he spent the majority of his childhood. After high school, He finally had enough of the cold and took his talents to Florida State University, go Noles. And once he left the North, he never looked back. Then after living in a myriad of different places, from Dallas to Jacksonville to even Miami, he finally found his new permanent home in Nashville, where he met my mother. Perhaps my favorite story about my dad is the way in which things began between my mom and him. They were both downtown in Nashville at a concert, and they had some mutual friends, but they themselves did not know each other that well. But my dad noticed that a friend of theirs who was supposed to give my mom a ride home that night had a little too much to drink, and my dad made the executive decision that he was not going to let my mom get in the car with him. So he then proceeded to make sure that their friend got home safe, and then he gave my mom a ride home instead and made sure she got home safe. You could say my dad pulled the old Mr. Steal Your Girl role that night, but obviously it was for a good cause. The next day, my mom was at work when she got a call to her office saying that somebody was there to give her some flowers. And my grandfather was in town that weekend in Nashville, so she assumed he was there just to greet her and give her some flowers. And she walked down to see my dad standing there with some flowers. And this was a pretty bold move, given that they really didn't know each other that well. But obviously it worked, and I may not have inherited his sense of style, but I at least like to think I've inherited the skills with the women. But that's still up for debate. We'll have to see about that one. So, aside from his family, the two greatest loves in my dad's life are sports and music. His favorite teams, the Boston Bruins, the Green Bay Packers, and the Florida State Seminoles, have been significant parts to all of our upbringings. Two of my most memorable moments have undoubtedly been with my dad, witnessing FSU football's 2013 national championship win over Auburn in Pasadena. I apologize, Auburn fans, for that bad memory, but it was an incredible game. And also, the Boston Bruins Game 3 win over the Vancouver Canucks in Boston during the 2010 Stanley Cup Finals. These are some moments I will never forget. So, given my dad's lifelong devotion to the Boston Bruins, he inevitably has a liking for the legendary defenseman of his childhood, the great Bobby Orr. Now, if you don't know who Bobby Orr is, you should. And, if you want to know, just go talk to my dad and you'll have a 2-hour conversation with him about it. Because this guy is actually my dad's idol, and I'm convinced my dad might be his biggest fan. He's even often told me that the two people he would want to meet in the world, dead or living, over anyone else, would be Bobby Orr or John Lennon. So, about 2 years ago, when the Predators won the Stanley Cup Finals, my dad decided to send Bobby Orr an email inviting him to a finals game. It was obviously a complete shot in the dark, but he thought he would just go for it. Then a few hours later, while my dad was in a work meeting, he got an email from Bobby Orr's son asking for my dad's phone number. And I imagine immediately my dad was freaking out. And, I'm sure minutes later, my dad sees a phone call from an unidentified number. He abruptly got up from his meeting. I'm sure everybody in the meeting room was completely confused, just stood up and stormed out of the room to take the phone call. So he answers the phone, and the voice on the other end says, "Hello, Bob. This is Bobby Orr." I'm seriously, honestly surprised my dad did not faint on the spot. And they talked for what my dad says was around 15 minutes, but I'm going to guess it was probably around 2 or 3 minutes, if we're being real, but not important. In the end, Mr. Orr couldn't go to the Stanley Cup Finals game because he had a family commitment, but my dad got to talk to his childhood hero. My dad often says this phone call was the greatest moment of his life. Then he'll look at my mom and correct himself and say, besides getting married and having children, of course. So, as I said, my dad's other greatest interest is music. Many of my friends in here are well aware of my dad's love for artists such as Peter Frampton, the Eagles, the Beach Boys, and most of all, the Beatles. He even named my brother after John Lennon. So in our unfinished basement at our house, which many more people refer to as the dungeon, my dad has over 10,000 CDs and 7,000 records that he has collected over the last 30 or so years. This collection is undoubtedly my dad's life's work. He even refers to himself as an intensive musical collector. Now, I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds pretty official. But during the Nashville floods in 2010, we had around 3 feet of water in our basement, and everything down there was in jeopardy. We had things like family photos, clothes, and many other sentimental items down there. But to my dad, those things were just going to have to wait. The records had to come first. I'm not sure I've ever seen my dad more stressed. My dad waded through the treacherous waters of our basement until he reached a point where he could hand off a stack of vinyl to the assembly line of my family members he had orchestrated going into the upstairs of our house. Now, keep in mind, at this time, I think I was around maybe 9 years old. My little sister's probably 6. My older sister's 14. My brother's 11. So we formed this assembly line going up the stairs, carrying thousands of records to safety before anything else. So after only about 8 hours, the crisis was averted, and my family safely transported all the records to the upstairs of our home, which turned into Grimey's record store for about 2 months. My father has taught me countless valuable lessons growing up. He's helped me realize the value in being financially responsible, something I myself have not yet mastered. He's also stressed to me the importance of finding something in life that I love to do. I understand the phrase is cliche, but he has taught me the truth in saying, if you love what you do, you will never work a day in your life. He works for a health insurance brokerage company, but he's always told me his job is really just getting to talk to people. I've never met someone more enthusiastic about their work or someone who works harder than my dad. I hope to find something in life that I love to do, just as he did. My dad has also always urged me to stand up for what I believe in. He never wants me to forget who I am, no matter what others may say or think. And most of all, he's taught me the value in being kind and respectful towards others. I've watched the way he's treated my mother and my sisters, and my dad's provided me with an excellent example of a husband and father for me to look up to. I will cherish the stories about my dad for the rest of my life, but they do not do justice to the type of man my father is. He has made countless sacrifices to give me this life that I have, and has always been someone for me to look up to. Things have not always been easy, and I've made my fair share of mistakes growing up. But my dad has always found a lesson to teach me in all of those mistakes. He has led our family through the hard times and the good times, and I couldn't be more grateful for all my dad has done for me. He has played, perhaps, the largest role in making me into the man I am today. Thank you, Dad. I love you.
Like most of my peers, I tried to keep this a secret from my stepfather. Sorry, John, I'm going to break your one golden rule. Don't embarrass me. Hiding from this is a fact which is much easier said than done. More on that in just a second. To this day, I have never seen you fall. A reality which is incredibly frustrating for me because for those of you who don't know, my stepfather is legally blind. Later in the speech, you'll see just how much John manages to do that he just shouldn't be able to do. While we're on the topic, y'all don't understand how difficult it is to hide anything from a blind person. In my 13 years with him, I've come to the following conclusion. If you hide it, he'll find it instantly. But when you leave something in plain sight, you only have to worry about the sighted mom finding it. Pick your poison. John, you're the center of the majority of the jokes in the family. We call you the blind man more often than your name. Whenever someone reads something off of their phones, we always wait for the inevitable, you sighted people, followed by a heavy sigh. You haven't even embraced this teasing, and when someone says, I can't see, you're always the first to chip in with, get your own gimmick. Mom would be taken aback to know some of the weird jokes we make. We may play rough, whether it be get off my property or the many jokes that run through the family, but at the end of the day, that's how my family shows our love. John, I have an unparalleled amount of respect for you. You're blind, and yet you work at Vanderbilt as the Associate Director of IT Service Delivery. You beat me in words with friends more often than not. You're the best wee bowler I've ever seen. You swing a pickaxe frighteningly well. Mom has an album of pictures of you and your cane, as you call it, your sympathy stick, driving various vehicles, such as a seaplane, a convertible Mustang, one of the stuffed animals in the Opera Mills Mall, a bronze statue of a pig, etc. Your Eagle Scout project was to make Braille menus for Cracker Barrel. You have accomplished all of these things, and yet you can hardly see your phone screen when it's right in front of your face. Your impairment hasn't hindered you as most would expect. You have done things that even fully sighted people struggle with, and you have taught me to work past my limitations. Honestly, we've never done any of the typical father-son relationship things. We've never worked on a car together. The closest thing we've had to throwing around a football was the one time someone threw a fish at you and gave you a black eye. We used to go camping together, but that became very difficult for you, so we stopped. But to be honest, I wouldn't want it any other way. You make your signature French toast sometimes on Saturday mornings, a ritual I am thankful to have the chance to learn the secrets from you. You smoke meats for the family. You sport all of my ridiculous interests, even when you knew I couldn't gain approval from Mom. When Mom would have choir, we would have man nights. On such occasions, a blind man, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old would walk a mile on a busy road that didn't have a sidewalk in order to get some inedible Chinese takeout. After all, what could possibly go wrong? But the deal was always the same. Either we could eat with our elbows on the table and have a glass of soda, or we could eat in the living room and watch a movie. On numerous occasions, you have been the middleman between a disagreeing son and his mother, challenging both of us to think rationally and de-escalate the situation, even if it didn't work. You've guided me in every manner you could and taught me what it meant to have a work ethic. You've given me life advice that I couldn't get from anyone else. John, while our relationship isn't what most people would imagine it, I couldn't ask for a better person to call my stepdad and my role model. It's incredibly frustrating, though, to know that the person I look up to most in life has yet to fall. I've never called you Dad, solely because I have a father that I see every now and then, but it doesn't feel right to call both of you Dad. That doesn't give you due justice because you're the best father figure I could have asked for. For the past 13 years, it's been the blind leading the blonde, and I just wanted to say, I love you, Dad.
Each year, the Fathers Club helps us by recognizing 2 faculty at this event. Would Mike Anderson and Kevin Anglin please come up? Join me in congratulating both of them. Mike Anderson graduated from MBA in 1993, then matriculated at the University of Tennessee, where he lettered in baseball and majored in English. Mike started in MBA in 2003. He teaches in our junior school. He's our head baseball coach. He's the assistant athletic director, and he heads up a lot of young people in the summer in our sports camps. Again, thanks for all you do, Mike, and congratulations. Kevin Anglin graduated from Vanderbilt University, where he lettered in basketball, had an outstanding career, and majored in mathematics. Kevin Anglin also came to MBA in 2003. He teaches college algebra trig and computer, and he's our head basketball coach. Join me in congratulating Kevin.
Hello, Glenn. Since the first time my father and I ever came to a father-son dinner, I made sure my dad knew that my senior year, I would be giving a speech about him. When I was a meager little microbe, I noticed a senior deliver a roast of his dad in front of thousands of people. And for some idea, that sounded like a lot of fun. So my dad and I have been joking about it since 7th grade, saying the roast I delivered to him would be on par with something that, if said at the mother-son breakfast, would soon be followed by moms storming the stage with sporks and sage sausage biscuits. I will admit, I may expose you a little bit, Dad, but it'll all be in good faith. Most of my friends are either terrified of my dad or realize that he's somewhat cool. Only few know his golfing side. Glenn Funk, the district attorney of Nashville, becomes an animal on the course no matter the circumstances. Every so often, my dad, my sister, and I go and play a round of 18 under the title of a family championship. While it may seem menial, the family championship means everything in the Funk family. No one talks, everyone walks, no praise for good shots or good putts. Once the tee goes into the ground, the game is on. A few years ago, we were having a family championship out at the Golf Club of Tennessee, and my sister decided to bring her boyfriend, a true instance of psychological warfare. As the match was getting more and more intense, anger was boiling up in every player. Glenn steps over his ball, takes a few practice swings, proceeds to then swing over his ball and hit 3 feet behind it, essentially whiffs, proceeds to walk up without saying anything, stands over his golf ball again, and sculls it into the far water hazard and proceeds to make what is known to be an X on a golf hole. Then, to make the story even worse, he takes his 7-iron out of his golf bag and starts beating his golf bag with his 7-iron for, I swear, about 15 seconds. Later in the round, we went to call my mom to tell her where we were, and turns out he had left his iPhone in his bag and it was completely shattered. While Glenn's largest tantrums reside on the golf course, he truly loves the sport. Last winter break, he dragged William Davis, William Wheeler, and I down to Opelika, Alabama, to play golf in 26-degree Fahrenheit weather. Cold enough to where, if you hit it thin, you cry out in pain. However, Glenn persisted we play 36 holes a day, waking up at 7 and going until it got dark out. It got to a point where the 3 teenagers had to go inside while the 57-year-old man decided to keep playing, bundled up, close to 7 layers on, and the thickest ski mask I've ever seen, teeing off while the 3 of us took the cart back to the clubhouse and back to the hotel. Later that night, he would come back into the hotel and sit in the shower for literally an hour just to de-thaw. And then when he'd get out, he'd proceed to tell us all of the great shots we had missed and how we had missed a great opportunity to play the wonderful game of golf and enjoy each other's fellowship. We had no qualms about missing out on that opportunity. While I'm about halfway through my speech, y'all must be wondering if I'm ever going to say any genuine nice things about my father. Don't worry, he is prepared to give a rebuttal immediately after my speech if I roast him too much. Most of my friends and most of my mentors can tell you, I have an extremely close relationship with my father. My mom and his friends describe us as the same person, only besides the age difference and the gray hair. I credit my dad with most of my development as a person and as an intellectual, and I honestly couldn't be more thankful to have him in my life. My dad lives a busy life with hundreds of meetings, probably scheduled all on the same day at the same time. Yet, he maintains his focus on our family and is integral in all of our lives. In fact, during this last year, he's driven to some of my debate tournaments across the country just so he can watch. Hundreds of miles just to support his son. He doesn't even really understand debate. While he has gotten better, debaters talk extremely fast, and given that he sometimes can't hear his alarm in the mornings, there's no way he can truly comprehend all of the words being said. Yet he still comes. Once the round ends, he sits outside and gets nervous about judges and just waits for me to come back with the results. I've had the privilege of always having a dad whose support is never waning and willing to do anything for his family. Sometimes, my dad and I randomly hop in the car and go on road trips. Before I came to MBA, we drove across the country, stopping at tiny towns and doing random shenanigans, including a local New Mexico dinosaur museum that probably cost about $10 to make, the highest points of 3 different states in the Midwest, and of course, driving through Caesar's Palace while Glenn, the later district attorney, snuck his 13-year-old son into the sports book. Recently, my dad and I drove and decided to drive on a random weekend with no plans, and all we told my mom was that we were leaving Nashville. We started driving into the depths of Alabama, and we decided we'd stop at Alabama's highest point. While we weren't able to see the beautiful heights of Alabama due to fog, we still got the opportunity to adventure together. About 4 hours into our trip, my mom calls us, and she asks, "Where are we and where are we going?" We respond with, "We still don't know. We're still driving, and we're still having an adventure." By now, we are in the boonies of Alabama, and if you get out of the car, it's probably dangerous. However, we called around and searched on our phones for a nice golf resort called Callaway Gardens. We looked online, we made some calls, and then we sealed the deal once we figured out that they had a prime rib buffet that night. Perfect. In reality, it didn't matter where my dad and I went on that trip because we'd still have the opportunity to be together and enjoy the fellowship of one another. You see, with my dad, we discuss all kinds of things, whether it's politics, sports, or any random thing that he had seen on Late Night Animal Planet, like how dangerous Komodo dragons could be. When we'd go out and play golf, we'd wake up early, leave our phones in our bags, and just play golf together and genuinely enjoy each other's company. When I go off to college this fall and leave Nashville, my dad and I will still be taking random road trips on my breaks and continue our goonery. Having Glenn as a father not only provides the loving and caring role a young boy needs, but it also provides me with the best friend. Glenn, thank you for always being by my side, spending late nights helping me study, pulling all-nighters so you could wake me up early the next morning and teach me what in the world was going on in Miss Chin's algebra honors class. Thank you for showing me what it's like to be a man, devoting yourself to your family and loving your work. But mostly, thank you for being you, the goofy, intelligent, kind, but sometimes sarcastic loon who lives his life for the best and enjoys what matters most. Love you, Pops.
Good afternoon. I have to be honest. I cannot believe that all our seniors are finally here having our final father-son banquet. This event has always been one of the few times during the year that me and my dad got to sit down and have dinner together before we continued on with our night. It has never seemed so special until now. My dad has always liked to joke in the past and asked me if I was going to be giving a speech about him in the future. I always shrugged it off when I was younger, indicating there would be no way I'd be standing in front of a crowd talking about my dad. But here I am, offering my dad the spotlight. My dad has always been straightforward with me. He has never sugarcoated anything. If something needed to be done, it was stated with utter transparency. It was always known that I needed to do the dishes before my dad got home, but my procrastination and stubbornness would delay that task. My dad would get home, the dishes weren't done, because in my mind, why did it matter if the dishes were done before he got home or in the next 5 minutes after he got home? Of course, I would lose that battle because it wasn't about having the dishes done, but rather my doing what was said and expected. My dad has always served a purpose that I misunderstood until recently. We are both somewhat stubborn and too self-reliant, but as I've gotten older and more mature, I've realized the importance of respect and understanding and working together for a larger purpose. I encourage all you underclassmen to try your best to do what your dads ask, even if you cannot see the bigger picture in the moment. Many of you know my dad and understand he may be a little overbearing at times, giving you the occasional punch in the arm or flick in the neck as a greeting. My dad and I have wrestled a lot over the years, and since my dad is bigger than I am, the horseplay didn't always go in my favor. But nowadays, his age and ability have taken a toll on him. After give or take 3 minutes into wrestling, he'd get tired or he'd fall to the ground, grabbing at his leg because he's gotten a cramp. I would see my opening and I would take advantage of the moment. taking revenge for all the years where I was held helpless with only my dog in the room to save me. Now, a few months ago, I learned that I would need hernia surgery. I knew I would have to take a time off of baseball, but this did not discourage me too much since I had already learned what it was like to sit out for my knee injury in football. I was, however, a little nervous for the surgery. My dad happened to work at the hospital where I received my surgery, which ended up being a plus. As we walked around preparing for my surgery, my dad knew everyone. Anyone who saw us would immediately light up and begin talking with my dad. My dad would joke around, crack jokes with all the employees, and they would tell me stories of all the things my dad did or said while at work, and this eased my mind off of the surgery. While I was there, I got to see the impact my dad has on others and the way he makes the day easier for all those around him. My dad has a way of taking the weight off of a situation. I remember playing 12U baseball with my travel team, and I guess my dad thought we needed to be a little bit more pumped up before games, so he decided to give us a pump-up speech and try and be a little inspirational. Now, my dad is not some amazing speech guru or anything, and he knew that. So this is what he decided to do. He'd bring us all in a little circle in the dugout, and he would just whisper, just psh, 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 psh. And we'd all burst out, say, all hype, like he gave the best speech of his life. Now all the parents were in the stands wondering what amazing, wonderful motivation speech had he just given to pump us up before the game. Little did they know, it was nothing at all. Another time, I'd be playing 10-year-old football in the freezing cold, sleet, muddy field. Nobody wanted to be out there. But my dad would think it was appropriate to take his shirt off and yell, "It's not cold out here!" And we're all like, "Yes, Dad, it's cold out here." But this was just another example of the great lengths my dad would go to hype us up before a game. My dad and I have stayed in countless hotels over the year while on baseball trips, and it has given us a chance to talk, or not talk, but just be there together, and the sport has been unwavering. One of the greatest things that happened to me was turning 16 and being able to drive. Now, this is not something great just because now I can drive myself places and go where I want, but now, after football games and baseball games, I can have a little bit more time to myself to prepare for what my dad is going to have to say to me about what I should have done better. Younger and growing up, my dad has never been the one to congratulate me right away, but rather pick out the small things I did wrong. As I've gotten older, I've been able to know what I did wrong before I got to him, and I would tell him I knew I did this wrong, and we get in this whole conversation of, well, why did you do it if you knew you were wrong? And I would respond openly and honestly, it's a lot harder in game to do my best, not to be a little nervous and to make some mistakes. But of course, my dad doesn't always want to hear that explanation and goes on to tell me what I should have done. We have had to learn together to accept our inadequacies and work on communicating more openly with care. We often spend the next 2 hours in the cage without much conversation, but with the trust and the understanding that knows how much we care for one another. This last year has been very important to me. At the beginning of the year, I realized that I wanted to play sports in college. After talking to Coach Tips, I found out that I should have had this realization earlier. It seemed that I was way behind the curve to play baseball, and I needed to begin the process of recruitment for football very soon. After hearing this news, I was kind of distraught. I found myself going up to my room, dejected and without much hope. As I was practically unable to hold myself together, my dad was right up the stairs after me. He hugged me, and he calmed me down, and he told me that we could do anything if we worked hard enough and wanted it. Now I stand here today with multiple D3 offers to play football and a couple possibilities for baseball, which I don't think would have occurred without my dad standing beside me. Dad, you've made me such a better man. And I know that I can be a better father to my children because I've had such an amazing role model. I love you.
Thank you, Sam.
All right. Good evening, everyone. When Mr. Gioia first asked me to speak at this event a few weeks ago, my first thought was, wow, my dad's right again. Since 7th grade, after every father-son dinner, my father has been telling me that Mr. Gioia is going to ask me to speak here. Well, Dad, I don't know how you knew, but you were right. Massad Massad was born on November 4th, 1970 in Amman, Jordan. When my dad tells me stories about his childhood in Jordan, he must either be the world's greatest exaggerator or he must have actually lived in a crazy, lawless town. My dad has been hit by a car multiple times. After getting hit the first time, I feel like he would have learned to maybe look both ways before crossing the street, but no, not my dad. During one of these instances, he was trying to catch a free ride and jumped in the back of a truck as it was driving past. The only problem was that the truck driver didn't realize my dad was dangling off the truck by his shoe until he had driven a few miles and my dad was in a coma. Another example of one of my dad's stories would be about how brutal his walk to school every day was. Every time he tells me about his middle school, the distance he had to walk there changes. Sometimes he walked a mile, other times it was 2 miles, it even got up to 3.5 miles at one point. But the best part of this story is that the school's on a really big hill, and somehow he had to walk up the hill to and from the school, which never really made sense, so yeah. But when my dad turned 17, he made the decision to come to the United States. He chose the United States because this is the land of opportunity. And as cliche as that sounds, Jordan truly does not offer nearly the same amount of class mobility or job opportunity as the States. So, by himself, my dad journeyed halfway across the world to work here and start his life. He had $2,000 in his pocket, a suitcase, and didn't speak a word of English when he first arrived, which still puzzles me as to how he got by. However, my dad started off in a big way when he came to the USA. His first job was actually at St. Thomas Hospital, just down the street. He worked as a valet parking cars. The ironic part is that the legal driving age in Jordan is 18. My dad came here when he was 17, so either he was driving illegally in Jordan or he learned how to drive with a stranger's car at St. Thomas. After working at St. Thomas, my dad decided to get into the restaurant industry and started a job at Pizza Hut as a dishwasher and Denny's as a server. He worked 2 jobs for a while, which honestly, I couldn't imagine how hard that must have been. Anyways, though, working in the restaurant industry, speaking English is a really important skill you must have. And like I said before, my dad came here not knowing any English, so by this point in his life, he was still pretty bad. Just to give you an example, one night a really tall, maybe 6'6", 6'7" foot guy walked into the Pizza Hut my dad was working at. My dad was curious as to how tall he was, so he goes over to his table and asks him, "Hey, how long are you?" That must have been pretty awkward. Despite my dad's lack of English vocabulary, he progressed within the Pizza Hut food chain and became a regional manager after a while. After seeing no more room for advancement within their franchise, he decided to quit and work for himself.
Since I've been born, my dad has owned over 16 gas stations, a furniture store, a car dealership, an environmental service, a liquor store, and dabbles in any other business opportunity he can get his hands on. This is the biggest reason why I hate being asked the question, what does your dad do for a living? One of my dad's greatest passions that he has passed down to me is his love of traveling and experiencing different cultures. We have traveled all over Europe and the Middle East. One of the best parts about traveling is the special VIP treatment we get in the airports, especially at JFK and O'Hare. We have people dressed in suits and very professionally waiting for us at the airplane door when we land so they can escort us to baggage claim. Once we get there, they tell us to show them which bags are ours and not to worry about touching them because they'll carry it for us. After this, they take my dad and our luggage with them. A couple of hours later, magically, my dad and the luggage reappear again. I didn't realize until I was about 11 or 12 that these men wearing suits were actually Homeland Security, randomly searching and questioning my dad. Now that I think about it, though, I'm not really surprised that they search you. I mean, you look like a major threat. Randy, I don't know if you're in here, but we might have a security breach up front. I don't know, though, if my dad realizes that his actions in the airport can seem very suspicious to the typical American. My dad loves reading. He reads everything, but especially the newspaper. But not just any newspaper. He reads the Arab newspapers like Al Jazeera. Anyways, my family and I were boarding a plane, and it was one of those big 747s where it has 3 seats, then 4 seats in the middle, then 3 seats on the other side. So my sister, who was maybe 6, 7 at the time, she takes the window seat. My dad takes the middle seat, and my mom and I sit directly in the row behind him. And then on comes a lady comes onto the plane. She sits next to my dad and glances over to his phone and sees him reading Al Jazeera. I hate to admit it, but I peeked at what this woman was texting, and she was telling her boyfriend or husband or whatever how she was so scared of this Arab man sitting next to her and she hopes to land safely. The funny part about all this is that this lady was also an immigrant, just like the very threatening Arab man sitting next to her. Another way my dad can seem very threatening is when he talks on the phone in the airport. Many of you probably don't know this, but Arabic is a very loud and passionate language. So when it sounds like an Arab is yelling, that's just his normal voice. So imagine you're walking through the airport and you see my dad doing something like, Assalamu alaikum, kif halak habibi, yalla 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 yalla. That might be a little scary. I mean, I'll admit it myself. Jokes aside, though, I love my dad, even if he does draw lots of unwanted attention in airports or loves embarrassing me. My dad is my biggest supporter. He's never missed one of my football games, even when I didn't start my freshman and sophomore years. The ironic part is that he is often heard yelling at the referees in Arabic, even though he has no idea what they called. But that's just the type of person he is. For those of you who personally know my dad, you can attest that Majid's personality can light up a room. When I found out I was admitted into Vanderbilt, I had a few friends over that night to celebrate with me, and my dad thought it was a great idea to come downstairs and announce to them, whoever says my name first correctly wins $100. Zach Garfinkel won the $100. After that night, my friends enjoy hanging out with my dad more than me. Majid Massad is the only person I know who can still be laughing and cracking jokes when he has the flu and 104-degree fever. This is what I love about my dad. He doesn't let anything put him down and attacks every day with a smile. Dad, you have been my biggest role model my whole life, and one day I want to be just like you. Well, maybe not exactly like you, but close enough. Even though I'm leaving for college in August, I'm only 25 minutes away, and I just want to go off script right now and tell you that you are the most selfless and generous person I've ever known, and I'm honored to be called your son. I love you, Dad.
Good evening. My name is Jackson Lampley, and tonight I will be giving you all some insight on what it's like to live with my father, Brad Lampley, and the path that he has taken to become the man that he is today. For those of you who have no idea who my dad is, he's that tall, really big guy that looks like a blonde-haired version of me. And if you haven't seen him walking around on campus with either Marcus Kreider or Chad Clifton on his way to the quarterback club luncheon, he's also the really stressed out looking guy in the stands during varsity football games who wears a faded NBA football hat with the number 75 on the back that he actually stole from me during my sophomore year. During varsity football games, he is constantly standing up in the stands with his cheap headphones in, listening to the Mike Martin broadcast with his NBA red number 75 Yeti mug that contains a Coke Zero. But enough about that. I mean, my father grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and played football for my grandfather, Dennis Lampley, at Trinity High School. He played right tackle for the Trinity Shamrocks, and believe it or not, he was actually pretty good. He was one of the highest rated prospects in the state of Kentucky, and at the end of his senior year, he signed to Coach Philip Fulmer on his first recruiting class at the University of Tennessee. There he played with, I think, some quarterback from Isidore Newman High School, I think in maybe Louisiana, who actually ended up being pretty good. My dad was also a graduate assistant on Tennessee's 1998 national championship team. And during the time that he was a grad assistant for the Vols, he was also getting his law degree. Shortly after finishing his degree, he and my mother decided that they were going to move to Nashville, where he got his first attorney job working for Stokes and Bartholomew. However, his days of coaching were not over. When I was around 6 years old, he became my flag football coach in the Franklin YMCA League. And I believe that we were the only flag football team that was actually able to execute the David Cutcliffe offense to perfection. He coached me in basketball for a few years, which is a sport that I don't think he ever played past elementary school. But he acts like he knows a lot about it since Hoosiers is one of his favorite movies. But all jokes aside, I've never seen a man who cares more about his kids, but at the same time balances his extremely busy work schedule. He's been my offensive line coach since the 4th grade, which is the year that I first started playing tackle football. He taught me how to be nasty, which is essential to playing offensive line. There was one time during halftime of a 2012 Brentwood Blaze football game where he told a bunch of 12-year-olds to hit the other team in the mouth, a comment which an opposing parent clearly heard, and that parent reported it to the league, which nearly got him suspended from coaching. In junior school, my dad even volunteered to coach our offensive line. And even though my dad wasn't technically my offensive line coach during my time on varsity, he would watch my film every day and tell me what I needed to work on after each game. And he went to every single one of my games and all of my scrimmages. I mean, I think he even missed a trip to New York to watch a scrimmage Smyrna High School. So, but he would also never hesitate to drive me over to NBA or the practice field at Grassham Middle School to work on my footwork or anything offensive line related. Without my dad's help, I definitely wouldn't be the player that I am today. During my sophomore year, I received my first scholarship offer to play college football from Butch Jones at the University of Tennessee, who was ranked number 9 at the time with a 5-1 record. And growing up, I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps and play for the Vols, so honestly, I wanted to commit to Coach Jones on the spot. But my dad told me to wait and look around at every other school who was eventually going to recruit me to ensure that I was going to make the right decision. We traveled all over the country to places like Ohio State, Louisville, Clemson, Ole Miss, Wisconsin, and many others, which I subsequently ended up comparing all of them to Tennessee. But there was a point during the fall of 2017 where the Vols fell to a 4-8 record, and Coach Jones had just been fired. And during that final week of the regular season, I witnessed the Auburn Tigers take down the Alabama Crimson Tide in the Iron Bowl. So I told my parents immediately following the visit that I wouldn't become an Auburn Tiger. However, my dad told me this, which is the best advice I could have gotten at the time. He said that you owe it to your home state to give Tennessee's new staff a visit. So about a month later, we ended up going up to Knoxville for what I thought would be my final trip up there. My parents and I immediately fell in love with Coach Pruitt and the new staff at Tennessee, and I ended up committing soon after the visit. But, in conclusion, most dads at NBA may seem like they're obsessed with pushing their sons in one direction, whether that is through athletics, academics, or even the college admissions process. But during my time at NBA, I realized that my dad's obsession with my future has benefited me in more ways than I can possibly fathom. Without my dad being there for me, there's no possible way that I could have made it this far through NBA. And I know the same could be said for pretty much all of you. Dad, I just want to thank you, Mom, for all that y'all have done for me. Without you being there for me, I have no idea where I would be today. Thank you, and I love you.